microphones on mute, that would be really helpful, just so we can reduce that background noise down. That would be brilliant. Thank you. Great stuff. So I'm going to get cracking in a second, and Lydia can let any latecomers in as we go. So welcome everyone for joining today. I think there's one person that might have their microphone on. If you could just turn that off, that would be really helpful, just so we can keep the noise down. Lovely. So welcome. I am Jessica, a HR Director at JourneyHR, and I'm thrilled to be hosting the third webinar in our Future of Work series, guiding you through these incoming legislative changes. We have a brilliant panel lined up today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a moment. But before we do that, we have a quick bit of housekeeping. Firstly, we're recording today's session, so if anyone in the audience wants to turn their camera off, that's absolutely fine. We're going to have the opportunity for questions at the end, and you can put your questions in the chat function, or you can shout out if you wish to do so. So could someone just turn their... Can hear a little bit of background noise there. If someone can turn their mic off, that would be great. Thank you. So why are we here today? Our last Future of Work event in April covered a broader overview of the incoming legislative changes. That webinar is available via our website for those who missed it and want a quick recap. However, one of the key changes, which is very important, is the incoming legislation covering the prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace. Now, this is an area that's come under much needed scrutiny in recent years, and it's a positive move that this is now an increased area of focus. As employers, it's super important to ensure that you're activating the right changes internally to ensure that you not only comply with the legislation, but that you're continually creating that safe environment for your employees. So without further ado, we're going to get into it. So before we start, I would just love the panelists to introduce themselves. Firstly, I am Jessica. I'm a HR Director at JourneyHR. I have more than 20 years experience now in the wonderful world of HR, and I've spent most of my career in the creative advertising media space before coming to JourneyHR around 3 years ago now. Nina, I'd like you to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So for the same amount of time that Jessica's been working in HR, I've been a psychologist specialising specifically in the psychology of sexual harm. I've had an interesting career following this topic area through our criminal justice systems, support services. I've worked a lot with universities, and in recent years spent a lot of time in workplaces helping employers get to grips with their responses to sexual harassment in the workplace, but also the preventative piece too.
Thank you, Nina. That's great. And Lydia?
Morning, everybody. So I'm Lydia. I'm also HR Director at JourneyHR. I've been here for over 4 years now, and before joining Journey, I worked in public sector as well as private, so have an array of experience in different sectors, and absolutely enjoy working with our wonderful clients here.
Thanks, Lydia, and thank you to both of you for joining me today. So our first section here is going to be a quick recap of what this legislative change is all about. And Lydia, I'm going to come to you first to lead this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jess. So, I mean, as you say, this is arguably one of the most significant developments in workplace harassment legislation that we've seen in recent years. And that's because it's fundamentally changing what employers are expected to do. So historically, in relation to harassment, sexual harassment, the focus has largely been on what happens after a complaint is raised. The legal expectation was that employers had to have, appropriate policies, and they had to investigate concerns properly and take action when required. That changed in October 2024, and you can see our timeline here. And that was when the Worker Protection Act was introduced. So for the first time, employers were given a legal duty to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment before it happened. So that wasn't just about, having a policy that sat on a shared drive, that expectation became that organisations need to think proactively about preventing harm, identifying any risks, and creating a worker-safe environment, training their employers on what sexual harassment actually means and their role in preventing it. Where an employer breaches that duty, tribunals can increase compensation up to 25% in successful claims. So that again in itself is really significant. Come April 26, just gone, those protections expanded again. So sexual harassment disclosures were then expressly incorporated into whistleblowing legislation. And what that means is where someone raises a concern about sexual harassment, either because it's occurred, it is occurring, or it's likely to occur, so those three categories, they may benefit from enhanced protection of detriment or dismissal. So it's under whistleblowing. For employers, what that means is that harassment can no longer be viewed just as a, employee relations issue. It falls into whistleblowing territory. Then we move to October 26, which is just around the corner. And this is where the most significant shift is now coming into play. The first piece is that the duty moves from taking reasonable steps to taking all reasonable steps. And that sounds just like a small wording change, but it's legally very, very different. It raises the threshold considerably, and it creates a much higher expectation that employers can demonstrate that they've thought about risks, they've assessed them, and they've taken every reasonable preventative step that's available to them. So the second major change come October is the introduction of third-party harassment liability. And I'll come on to that in a bit more detail in the next slide. But ultimately, the question that employers are increasingly going to be asked is no longer, did you respond appropriately after something happened? And it's going to become, can you demonstrate that you identified any foreseeable risk and you took proactive steps to prevent harm before it occurred? And that is a very different question. Brilliant. So as I say, third-party harassment is the second piece to the legislation come October. But what does that mean in practice? So third-party harassment happens when a worker experiences unwanted conduct of a sexual nature from someone who is not a colleague, but it could be a client, a customer, a contractor. And again, we've listed out here who could be considered a third party, and you can see it's all encompassing. So come October, employers are legally required to take all reasonable steps to prevent these external individuals from sexually harassing their staff while at work. So for many organisations, and particularly those that we work with in the creative space and in client-facing sectors, this is likely to be one of the most challenging aspects of the legislation. Most employers have got a reasonable degree of control over their own employees. We can train them, we can manage, we can investigate, and we can hold people to account. What they don't control are the clients or the freelancers, the suppliers, or other external stakeholders. Yeah, in many businesses, these are often the people that employees can interact with the most day to day. And like I say, and a lot of the clients that we work with, and in many organisations, work can often happen during client pitches, productions, shoots, networking events, client dinners and lunches, and even more social settings. And those environments naturally can involve blurred professional boundaries. They can have power imbalances, and they can have commercial pressures. And due to all of those factors, employees can often find themselves asking, do I challenge this person? Do I say something? Would I damage the client relationship if I raise this? And really importantly, would my employer support me if I raise that? And that uncertainty is where risk sits. So the legislation isn't saying that employers must control every action of every third party, because that's unrealistic. But what it is saying is that employers need to think proactively about any foreseeable risks in these types of situations and take preventative steps. So what that means is, do our managers know how to intervene in the moment that something may occur? Does an employee know how to report any concerns that do involve clients or contractors or any third party contact? Have we set out the behavioural expectations clearly to external parties? Have we reviewed high risk environments such as events or productions? And then have we taken steps to mitigate those risks? And have we also made sure there are really clear escalation routes where concerns arise? A really practical step that we've taken at Journey with our clients and ourselves is ensuring that any supplier agreement, consultant contract and client-facing terms explicitly referenced our dignity at work expectations. And that serves two purposes. Firstly, it's really explicit what we expect in terms of behaviour. And secondly, it's demonstrating that we've proactively considered third-party conduct and we're communicating our standards before anything occurs. And from an evidence perspective, that's exactly the type of proactive step employers should be considering under all reasonable steps. Another key question that I think is really important here when we think about third-party harassment, particularly, as I say, in client-facing organisations, is leaders should be thinking to themselves, if an employee reported inappropriate behaviour by one of our most, commercially valuable clients tomorrow, would they feel confident that we would back them? So are we creating a culture, a speak-up culture that does empower our employees to come forward with any concerns? Because that really is where the legislation will be tested. Thank you. So my last piece here is the consequences of getting this wrong. And I think when most people think about these changes, the first instinct is to go directly to legal liability, because that's what we all speak about all the time. And absolutely, there are legal consequences and they're very real. Tribunals will be looking much more closely. I think there's a bit of noise going on there.
If everyone can just make sure their microphones are switched on, that would be great. Or switched off even. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Sorry, Lydia.
That's fine. Like I say, I think a lot of the time when we think about these changes, we immediately go to legal liability being the ultimate risk, and it's a very real risk. And tribunals will certainly be looking at whether employers can demonstrate that they've taken all reasonable steps, and there is that potential for compensation uplifts and third-party harassment claims. But in reality, for a lot of organisations, the wider consequences can be as much or even more so damaging for them. And the first one I want to talk about is cultural. So employees more and more now are constantly assessing whether an organisation's stated values, which are in the handbook, they're part of the induction process, do their actions match those values? And that's constantly something that we come back to. When concerns are handled poorly, obviously trust erodes very, very quickly. People stop reporting issues. Managers can become quite reluctant to intervene, and employees can assume that reporting an incident or having a difficult conversation won't lead to meaningful action. And once that trust is lost, it's very difficult to build back up again. There's also a significant talent risk. In particular, we're in a multi-generational workforce, and the younger generations in particular do place a lot of emphasis on expecting employers to take visible action on inclusion and safety and dignity at work, rightly so. So where an organisation is perceived to tolerate poor behaviour, retention can become a lot more challenging, and employees do vote with their feet, and we see this. And then there's the reputational risk. So this is a really big one. in today's environment and access to social media, workplace issues do often extend far beyond, the internal walls and internal investigations. Concerns do reach online platforms, industry networks, review platforms, professional communities very, very quickly. And for many of the organisations that we support, reputation is one of the most valuable commercial assets. So, client-facing businesses do trade on trust and, brand credibility. So when workplace issues can become public, which they do, it can affect recruitment, it can affect client relationships, investor confidence. It really is all consuming. And as I say, there's a client risk there as well. So increasingly, businesses are being asked by their clients, their suppliers, their procurement teams, how can you demonstrate your commitment to a safe and inclusive working environment? And failure to be able to do that can absolutely influence the partnership, opportunities. So ultimately here, the risk is not just a tribunal risk. It is about, a cultural risk and an environment where people feel no longer safe to speak up, where leaders lose their credibility, and where culture really starts to weaken as a result of that. The organisations and the businesses that will be strongest under this legislation, they won't be the ones with the longest policies. They're going to be the ones where they can demonstrate genuine prevention, visible leadership accountability, and where they've encouraged a strong speak up culture, and they have that clear commitment to dignity at work. And that is what's going to distinguish compliance from best practice.
Yeah, thank you, Lydia. Some really good points there, and it's great to understand kind of what that legislation is and how it's changed. I'm sure there's going to be some questions at the end for you on that, but Nina, I'm going to come to you now because the behavioural and cultural dimension here is so important. But before we start, Nina, you have a new book out, so I'd love to hear more about that.
I do, because it's kind of timely. So I have a new book that is called All Reasonable Steps: How Psychology Transforms Workplace Sexual Harassment Prevention. And the book is really about meeting this moment. I think a lot of people are going to meet right now with that compliance mindset, which I completely understand. Like, are we meeting the standard? Is what we're doing enough? But the book is really helping us get our heads around, well, actually, how do we prevent this stuff from happening in the first place? And we've spoken about the consequences if we don't today. Like, there are lots of negative consequences, but there are also lots of real positives about doing this work and doing it well. So whilst we're meeting today with are we doing enough? This is a lot to hold. I think it's also really useful to recognize this is really work to celebrate, like through the luck of chance and time. This moment, those of us who are on this call, our job isn't to raise the alarm or point at this topic area for the first time. Our job is to make sure that we're actually walking the talk, doing what our policies say we want to do, living our values, living our culture. And the book is all about how you do that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's such an important topic, and that's the hardest thing, I think, to get right is, as Lydia said, you can have all the policies in the world, but if you're not living and breathing it every day and it doesn't trickle down from the leadership team, then you've not quite got it right. So where can people buy the book, out of interest?
You know what, my co-founder Cynthia is on the call, so I'm sure she could put a link in the chat, but if you go to consentcollective.com, it will be there.
Great, thank you, Nina. Right, so we will get cracking here. So I'd like to explore the topic a bit more. And from your experience here, what's the biggest mistake you see employers making when it comes to the prevention of sexual harassment?
I think what we've seen over the years is a very kind of procedural, administrative approach to sexual harassment. Even the fact that one of the biggest changes has been a move to zero tolerance stance, like a statement of how you want to be in relationship with this. Like, that's a nice aspiration, and it makes sense to have policies and processes. But what we haven't seen enough of, and what we need if we're going to prevent this from happening in the first place, is for employers to begin to understand that this is a human behavior. It happens in relationship. It's quite a complex human behavior that we are being rightly asked to stop from happening in our workplaces. So we really need to get to grips with the reality of what this is. Your policies are just the foundation. It's a bit like having a New Year's intention. You can have the intention, but you actually have to live it in order to create whatever change it is you want to see. And so definitely really understanding that there's more to this than policies, processes, reporting processes. We have to get into those kind of human dynamics. And when we do that, actually, there's a lot of behavioral science waiting for us to use and to start applying in our workplaces so that this work doesn't feel so scary. We need to understand that not all sexual harassment is the same. It's not perpetrated for the same reasons, not in the same ways. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not. We need to kind of really lift the lid on what is this behavior about and get a level of sophistication, just as we have in other areas of the workplace. I mean, you could take fire safety as an example. Like, there's some real science behind all of that around what materials are not allowed in a workplace, where they're stored, the fabrics we use, where fire alarms are positioned. There's a lot of thinking around that, and we need the same level of thinking when it comes to workplace sexual harassment.
Yeah. And is that what you mean when you talk about skills? So your book talks a lot about the importance of skills. So what skills do we need in our workforce?
Yeah, so much of this is about skills. So if you're thinking about training, I think historically the kind of training that's been offered to employees has been awareness raising. I think it's really important to recognize that most people are aware of sexual harassment. I mean, it's in the media constantly, that there is a good general awareness of what this is and how it shows up. But being aware of something doesn't give you the knowledge of what to do in the moment when it's happening, how to step in as a bystander, what you might do if you're on the receiving end of it too. And also the skills of self-reflection. A lot of sexual harassment is unintentional. Like, if we go to the definition of the law, it doesn't matter whether you intended to cause harm or not. It's about the impact of your behavior. And so we need the kind of training where people are invited to be able to self-reflect. We want to skill people so that they know what stepping in can look like, all of their different options, how to give feedback in a way where somebody might not get too defensive and they can actually listen what you're trying to tell them about their behavior, how to receive feedback. And the ultimate skill is really to understand that at the heart of all of these instances is consent. It's the fact that it was an unwanted behavior, and to understand that consent is a skill. It's something we can be skillful at, and it's something that we can be unskillful at. And so we need to help people understand all of this and have the opportunity to build on those skills. And what we're really talking about is psychological safety. Psychological safety is not, we are all nice people and nothing bad ever happens here. Psychological safety is, when difficult things happen, when challenges arise, when somebody says something inappropriate, we all have the interpersonal skills to have an appropriate conversation about what's just happened and hold it without overreacting, without underreacting to what's just happened. Those are the skills that we need, as well as, if somebody does choose to report, there can be a skillful and unskillful way of holding that report. So this is all about workplace skills. And all of those skills, they don't just help us prevent workplace sexual harassment. Like, being able to have challenging conversations with colleagues is a good news story for any organization, because it could be about inappropriate behavior, but it could be about a project that you're working on, or mistakes someone's made. Like, we need people to have these kinds of skills in our workplaces.
Yeah. And people are concerned about how they can train their people up in this area. At the end of today's session, we talk a little bit about the training that JourneyHR and the Consent Collective runs to help support people, and a lot of our clients have really benefited from those training modules. I think Lydia touched on the importance of leaders in this and making sure that they are living and breathing the values. But Nina, what role do you think leaders and more importantly managers have in preventing or enabling the issues?
Yeah, I think if it's not already happening in your workplace, what needs to happen now is that leaders need to understand they can't just point to HR or some other department and say, oh, you've got that, I don't need to think about it. This is so about your culture. It's so about your organization. Leaders need to fully understand and be demonstrating all of the skills I've just mentioned, so that they are role models for that culture, so that they're living and breathing that in their organization. They need to understand that as a senior leader, they are, like, in some sense, the greatest asset you have for your culture because they are that role model, but they are also the greatest risk. They hold more power than anyone else in the organization. They are less likely to be given feedback by anybody else because of that power dynamic. If there is an issue involving a senior leader, the damage on your reputation is going to be so much more. So leaders need to understand their kind of unique position as well as the general understanding of those skills. And I think a really key thing is leaders also need to understand that when it comes to other senior leaders, they as a peer group should be giving each other feedback. Like, it really needs to come from a fellow senior leader. So they should be managing themselves and not expecting to outsource that responsibility to anybody else.
Yeah, and that's really important. And I think managers are often, so that middle layer of managers are often another layer that is kind of almost left out of some of these conversations. We do a lot of work at JourneyHR with middle level managers who have become managers because they are brilliant at their craft. But you don't wake up a brilliant manager. You don't wake up with all the skills in the toolbox that you need. So what should a confident manager actually say or do in the moment?
I think that manager response, I think managers are being asked to hold more and more complexity when it comes to interpersonal dynamics. There's so many issues that they're effectively likely to be first or second responder to, and managing something in a team. So I think it is so important that they feel. Sorry,
sexual harassment seminar.
Sorry, we just had someone with their mic on there. If you could just pop your mic off for us, that would be great. Thanks. Sorry, Nina.
That's all right. So it's really important that they can feel confident with this topic area, that this is something that they feel that they can hold. And take it from me, 20 years doing this work, this is not a topic area that people automatically feel comfortable with, that people know it's high risk. There are lots of emotions involved. And so we are asking quite a lot of our managers, which is okay, but we need to support them to do that. And like, the ideal is, like, for me, our ideal isn't always report it and escalate it. The ideal is that if somebody can have a conversation in the moment, if the manager is able to hold the moment and have a conversation immediately, that can stop situations from escalating beyond the point that was necessary. So making sure that they're equipped so that they can do that. And also understanding if a manager does get this wrong, then that might be, particularly the kind of thing that you as an organization are held up for, if a case just does escalate, because that manager response needs to be appropriate. So giving people the skills, making it so that they can hear a disclosure and hear it in a skillful way, that they're able to give feedback to somebody who is perhaps very defensive, and a bit upset that they've been accused of something like that because they didn't mean to cause harm. Like, having those kinds of skills is really important.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the managers that we work with are so worried about saying the wrong thing or not activating the right channels to support an employee that has come forwards. But I would encourage that you have a good 3 months. So if people are concerned that their managers aren't trained in the right way or don't know how to act, or that you feel you've not put the right support measures in place for your business, you still have time to put a really robust plan of action in place, and Journey and obviously the Consent Collective can support with that. Nina, Lydia spoke a bit about the third party harassments. Are there any additional risks that they could create?
Yeah, there's definitely additional risk. I think it's a good example of why you need these skills in place and why managers also need to be equipped, because including thinking about all of the skills people want, we need to start empowering people who are on the receiving end of harassment. We can't just say report it. We need to help people feel what their options are in the moment. What might they say? How might they reestablish professional boundaries? Who might be a support resource to them in the moment, so that people don't think, I don't know what to do, I'm supposed to report it, but who do I do that to? Like, we need to give people more options. So that part of the training too. And also the manager response, especially if you're in a fast moving working environment. So say you're in hospitality or something, you need managers to be responding swiftly, immediately, and dealing with the situation, because these situations can be fast moving. So yeah, I think the third party just escalates the need to have these skills in place. And actually, one of the things I'm seeing as well, one of the, if you like, advantages of third party is that sometimes there can be some internal resistance to doing this kind of work. Maybe people feel that they don't have a problem internally. But when we're invited to recognize there is third party risk, most organizations can get on board with that we need to protect people from the public, our clients, like these kinds of things. So it can reinvigorate an important conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to shout out to a couple of the people that put some comments in our chat bar here. So Amanda said that it's about proactive leadership accountability, and Kathy said that conversational intelligence is so important and so undertaught. And Nina, I just wondered if you had any thoughts on those two comments at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's all great in theory, isn't it? Like, if you see something, step in. What words are you going to use to start that conversation? Like literally, what is going to come out of your mouth? When they respond defensively, how are you going to hold that without minimizing what they've done? Because that would make them feel more comfortable, but now you've minimized it. Like, this is a genuine interpersonal skill. So supporting people with that is really important.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got a little bit of background noise. If people can just make sure their mics are turned off, that would be great. Thank you so much. And Nina, just finally, before we move on, what's the one thing you find that employers may not have thought about when it comes to this work?
Yeah, I almost feel like I should apologize for this, because I'm sure most people on the call thinking, oh gosh, I've already got quite a lot to get my head around. There's already a lot to hold here. But it's, better to be informed. I think one of the things people haven't thought enough about is secondary prevention. I'm using as a bit of psychology jargon, but what I mean by that is, how do we stop something from happening again? If we have a report and we uphold a complaint in our organization, but we decide it's appropriate for the person to stay within the business, how are you managing that now known risk? What I see too much of is employers just physically separating the two parties involved. And it's definitely time to recognize that that's not sophisticated enough. There are a number of things that you could do with that individual in terms of extra training and education, which would demonstrate that you're managing that risk. And also you need to be thinking about your risk assessment in a really sophisticated way, so that when something happens, you're not just dealing with that incident, you are also thinking about, okay, what mitigation is possible so that we can prevent that from happening again? What additional training, what updates to policies, all of this is, your risk assessment needs to be a living, breathing a process, not just a one and done form.
Yeah, and that's the one learning piece actually that we're taking forward with our clients is many of them have already done their risk assessment, but you don't do your risk assessment and then it gets put in a filing cabinet and is forgotten about for the next 5 years. It should be a living, breathing document that is constantly brought out and adjusted depending on the environment and what's happening in your workplace. Well, thanks, Nina. Let's move on to the next section. So I'd really like it if you could just give us an overview, Nina, of what are the top priorities that people need to do to get ready by October, and then also what does good training and awareness look like in this space?
Yeah, we've already mentioned risk assessment, and I would say that is, that I would say if you recognize you're perhaps at a starting place, I would say that would be a pretty good starting place, just to be aware of the work ahead, and set up a process that's gonna work for you, and something that is a process, as we've discussed, and not just a form, something that is alive and it has a pulse to do so. So I'd give that risk assessment a home. Some of the good things we see happening is employers establishing a working group or a steering group that specifically hold this issue, and are holding that risk assessment and feeding into it. An ideal would be that you've got different areas of the business represented so that you're getting that information. Not everything's going to be reported, but you still might find out about risk that not through a formal report. So that's the kind of thing that you can be thinking about. I'm going to get some support with it, like all of the different risks. I've already said that not all sexual harassment is the same. It happens for different reasons. There are so many different things that can escalate risk. The presence of alcohol, overnight stays, power dynamics. So you need to be aware of what those kinds of risks are so that you can see the higher risk situations in your organization. One of the things that we're really interested in, and actually it's a new project for us, we've got a champions project, and I think for both large and small organizations, I think the presence of champions within an organization, these being individuals, maybe they're managers, maybe they come from any area of the business, but they've had extra training and support. They're thinking about this in a more sophisticated way, and they're willing to champion this topic area internally and really help the organization be alive to risk, raise concerns where concerns need to happen, be somebody who's had a bit of extra support in terms of hearing disclosures if they want to be more of a visible point of contact for this topic area. I think that could really help organizations as they get their heads around this all reasonable steps provision. And then another thing that's really going to help, I've literally written a book about all of the psychology. So I would say if you are starting out and you're trying to get your head around what does this mean, that's probably a really useful kind of starting place for you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, Nina. Wonderful. So thanks both of you for your input today. It's been a really valuable discussion. We'll move on to questions shortly. However, before we do, I just wanted to remind people that you're not alone. So we are all here to support you. JourneyHR and the Consent Collective are partnered together, and between the two of us, we offer a whole range of different mechanisms to help support. So Lydia, I'm going to come back to you again now. How can JourneyHR support people through the next 3 months and beyond as this legislation comes into force?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've touched on it a fair bit, and Nina's just referenced it again. But one of the first things are risk assessments. And we've got a really comprehensive template that we can share and work with on our clients, and any kind of new people on the call, please reach out to us and we can walk through this document with you. It's really going to be delving into those risk areas, the priority areas, and then we can work with you on a strategy to obviously reduce and minimize those risks. In addition to that, we have got a checklist, which is a free resource to just make sure, are you ready come October? Again, you can reach out to Jess or I after this call for that link. Policies and processes. We've talked a lot about a policy alone is not enough, but you absolutely still need to have one. And we have got one. We work with our clients on making sure that that's accessible. It is really clear in reporting procedures, external resources. So again, if you haven't got one in play, please reach out to us and we can support you in that. And third-party links, I talked about this a fair bit, but making sure those expectations are really clear to your third parties you work with in terms of the expectations and standards of behaviour that you expect. we can make sure that you've got that covered in your terms and conditions, your contracts, your agreements. And then training is such an important one. Nina will absolutely talk about the brilliant Consent Collective e-learning bystander courses. At JourneyHR, we also do leadership and management awareness courses. You can reach out to Jess or I about that, but it really is taking people through, again, what does this mean? What is your role in it? How do you approach these scenarios to really ensure that the clients we work with and the employees feel empowered to talk up in the moment and how to approach those conversations?
Thanks, Lydia. That's all good stuff. And Nina, I'd love to delve in a bit about how the Consent Collective supports, because you do so much in this space. You have so many resources available. So it'd be great if you could give everyone an overview.
Yeah, so if you recognize that the skills training is something that your people might need, then you can access our skills training through JourneyHR. We've got an online course, which I would say, like, definitely you would want your managers to do. Other organizations are getting everybody to do it because they recognize that anybody could be a witness to this stuff. Anyone could hear a disclosure, and so everybody should have the skills. And that training is going to help people start to think about, oh, if I found that myself in that situation, like, what are the words I would use to start that conversation? How might I end the conversation? When would I escalate this? Like, really getting people to think about this from a skills point of view. I've got my book. If you're interested in, you want some more strategy, you want to understand the psychology more, you can get the book. There's an extra incentive. You can get 10% off if you use the coupon code PREPARED. At the checkout. That runs out at the end of October, as does your opportunity to be prepared for this new legislation. If you think that you need more support actually planning all of this as you get yourself ready, we're holding 2 full days where you can come with some peers and we can talk through a lot of this, like the risk assessment, the third party. It can be quite useful to hear what other people are doing, as well as have a space to kind of, think that through for your own organization. So those are available. And as I've mentioned, we've got our champions program. Maybe that's something for you. Maybe this is something that you are championing in your workplace, and you'd like to have more knowledge about what good practice is, more support in terms of hearing a disclosure, and just more awareness of that bit where you are lobbying for something, you're encouraging your workplace to be better at this, and you've got the resources and also the connection and the network and the support to do this work and do it well. Because unfortunately, doing this work can also be quite isolating. Like, I think in my experience, far too many people are doing this work and they feel alone in it. And they shouldn't feel alone, because this is something that's happening everywhere. There are so many of us that care about this and want to see good work done. So the Champions Programme is also a place where that can happen.
Thank you, Nina. And I see that Cynthia in the chat function has put those brilliant links to all of those so people can click on them and find out more. I will also, after today's session, share these slides along with details of how you can contact Cynthia and Nina and Lydia and myself if you have any additional questions. So we're nearly at the end now. Thank you so much to our brilliant panelists for today. There is a QR code here at the bottom, and we'd love to get your feedback on today's session. It will help us make these webinars even better in the future. It's a great opportunity, whilst we have Lydia and Nina on the call, to open the floor to anyone who wants to think about what their call to action might be, or if anyone has any questions for the panelists today. Thanks, Amanda, for your note there in the chat function. If no one has any questions, and I appreciate it's a very public forum, I'd really like Lydia and Nina to kind of give us your 1 or 2 top takeaways from today. Nina, I'll come to you first. If there's one thing that you think people should do, what is it?
I think it's about understanding that business as usual when it comes to this topic area is not what we need now. We need quite a transformative way of doing this work, which I think is really exciting. Like, this is fundamentally, when I approach this work, I'm always thinking about the women who would have gathered around kitchen tables like decades ago to start this conversation, and what they would think about today's webinar. They would be delighted to see that all of these workplaces and organizations are talking about preventing the problem that they were drawing attention to back in the 50s and the 60s. So, you know, I think it's really important to understand that what you're being asked to do now really is different. It requires a bit of different thinking, but you are not alone. Like, get support, learn what other people are doing. It's a process. We are all learning. So I don't want anybody to leave events like this feeling overwhelmed. I'm hoping that you can leave feeling inspired to be part of a moment in time where we have an opportunity to create a change that is very much needed.
Thanks, Nina, that's great. And Lydia, I'll come to you for your top takeaway from today.
So mine will be a question that I think I'm going to push back to everybody, and it's not to contradict Nina, because I agree totally. It's really inspiring, and we have got the time for change. But I think my landing question is, if a tribunal, you know, asks you tomorrow, what did you do to prevent harassment before it happened? What evidence could you show? Like, what have you got at the moment? Are you prepared? I think that's my key question to leave everybody with.
Thank you, both of you. But it's both excellent. And as you can see from the side chat bar here, people have taken a lot from today's session. You can get in touch with us at any time, people. We are always available to offer advice and support. And thank you both to the panelists. We really appreciate you joining today. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.